You ended that conversation hours ago, but you were still in it. You are lying there, eyes open, running the same exchange through your mind for the fourth time. Fifth time, you are changing your words, editing your tone, imagining what you should have said, what you could have done differently, what the other person must think of you now. It feels like you are solving something. Like if you just replay it enough times, you will finally find the version where everything goes right. But that version never comes. And yet you cannot stop. This is not anxiety. It is not weakness. It is not something wrong with you. The real reason goes much deeper than you think. What you are doing has a name in psychology. It is called rumination, from the Latin ruminare, which originally described the way cows re-chew their food. Carl Jung would not have been surprised by this image. He spent decades watching the human psyche do exactly that, swallowing an experience whole, then bringing it back up, over and over, trying to process something it was never quite able to digest the first time. But here is what most people miss entirely. The conversation you keep replaying is not actually about the conversation. Your mind is not replaying it to solve it. It is replaying it because something in that exchange touched a wound that was already there, long before that person said what they said, long before you responded the way you did. The words were a surface event. What happened underneath the words was something else entirely. Jung called these deeper structures complexes, not in the casual modern sense, not simply a word for insecurity or hang up. A complex, in Jungian depth psychology, is a cluster of emotionally charged memories and beliefs that form around a core wound, usually rooted in childhood, usually invisible to the conscious mind. And when something in the present world brushes against that complex, a tone, a pause, a look, a word delivered in just the wrong way, the psyche snaps awake like a finger touching a bruise you forgot you had. That is what happened in that conversation. Maybe someone dismissed what you said, and something deep inside you activated, the part that learned, very early, that your voice was not worth listening to. Maybe someone gave you a look, or used a certain tone of silence, and the child in you recognized it instantly as danger, as disapproval, as the familiar ache of not being enough. The words in the conversation were nothing. The tone, the pause, the expression, those were everything. Those were the signal. And now your conscious mind is stuck trying to solve a surface-level problem. What you said, what they meant, how it looked, while the deeper layer, the one carrying the original wound, is running an entirely different process underneath. This is what the psychologist James Hollis calls the invisible partner. Every conversation you have is not just a conversation between two people. It is a meeting between two full psychological histories. You bring your wounds to the table. They bring theirs. And sometimes those histories collide beneath the surface of perfectly ordinary words, and neither person is quite sure why the conversation suddenly felt so charged, so much heavier than it should have. The replay loop exists because your psyche knows something real was touched. It is trying to find the moment of contact, the exact second when the conversation shifted from ordinary to loaded, because it wants to understand what happened. The tragedy is that as long as you stay at the surface, replaying what was said and rearranging the dialogue, you never actually reach the wound. You keep polishing the symptom. There is another layer here that psychology rarely discusses in simple terms. When you replay a conversation, you are often not just re-examining your own behavior. You are rehearsing control. You are constructing alternative versions of reality where you had power, where you said the right thing, where you were not caught off guard, where you were not visibly affected. And this impulse reveals something important about the nature of the wound itself. Because when the wound is rooted in powerlessness, when the complex at the core comes from an early experience of being unable to protect yourself, unable to be heard, unable to control how others saw you, the mind compensates through internal rehearsal, through fantasy, through the exhausting, invisible labor of rewriting a past that has already happened and cannot be changed. Jung described the psyche as always moving toward wholeness, always trying to integrate what has been split off, suppressed, or left unprocessed. The rumination is not pathological in this light. It is an attempt at healing, a primitive one, an unsuccessful one, but an attempt, the psyche's version of returning to an old injury to see if it has healed yet. The problem is that replaying the conversation is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. You pour more words into it, more alternative dialogue, more imagined responses, and it empties out again immediately. Because words are not what the wound needs. What the wound actually needs is recognition, not explanation, not resolution, not an apology from the person who triggered it. Recognition, the act of pausing the mental replay long enough to ask a different question. Not what should I have said, but what just happened inside me. Where did that reaction come from? What part of me did that conversation reach? The philosopher Epictetus made a distinction that sounds almost unbearably simple until you actually try to live it. He separated what is up to us from what is not. The other person's words, not up to us. Their interpretation of you, not up to us. The way the conversation unfolded, which is now the immovable past, not up to us. What is up to us is the internal response, the direction of our own attention, the willingness to look at the wound instead of away from it. This is where depth psychology and practical philosophy converge. Both traditions arrive at the same point from different directions. The pain is not in the conversation. The pain is in the place inside you that the conversation reached, and that place existed long before this person, this exchange, this specific evening. There is a word for the practice of turning toward that place with intention, reflection, not rumination, not involuntary looping, but the deliberate act of sitting with an uncomfortable experience and asking what it uncovered. What belief did that moment confirm? What old story did it reactivate? What version of yourself, younger, less defended, not yet sure of your own worth, did it suddenly call forward into the present? When you actually do this, something shifts. The conversation stops being a problem to be solved and becomes information, data about your interior landscape, a map fragment of a part of yourself you may never have examined directly. The modern world does not teach this. It teaches distraction. It teaches that the uncomfortable feeling after a hard conversation is something to get over quickly, to shake off, to outrun with noise and movement, and the next thing. So you scroll. You reach for your phone. You turn on something to fill the silence. You look for anything that will break the loop without requiring you to enter it consciously. But the loop does not break that way. Because the wound does not disappear when you look away from it. It simply waits. And the next conversation that happens to brush against the same place starts the whole process again. And you find yourself back in the same loop, replaying different words that are carrying the same old charge. There is a specific kind of relief that comes from finally stopping the replay and doing something different. Not finding better words. Not arriving at a better outcome. Something more radical than either. Accepting that the conversation was exactly what it was, that you responded exactly as the person you currently are, carrying exactly the wounds you are currently carrying, and that this is not a failure. It is simply the current edge of your awareness. And edges can move, but only if you stop trying to rewind the tape and start asking what the tape was really recording. Jung spent his entire career arguing that the psyche is not your enemy, that even its most uncomfortable operations, the nightmares, the obsessions, the loops that run at 3 in the morning, are attempts at communication. Attempts to show you something about yourself that your conscious mind has been unwilling to see in the light of ordinary day. The conversation you cannot stop replaying is not haunting you. It is trying to reach you. You ended that conversation hours ago, but something in you is still waiting for you to actually begin it.